She slept with a Nazi officer while Paris burned. She stole designs from her competitors and called it inspiration. She built an empire on the backs of seamstresses she paid poorly, while wearing ropes of pearls worth fortunes. And yet, Coco Chanel remains one of the most influential women of the 20th century. The woman who liberated us from corsets, gave us the little black dress, and proved that a girl from an orphanage could rewrite the rules of elegance entirely. This is not a fairy tale. This is the story of Gabrielle Coco Chanel, a woman so complex and contradictory that even now, decades after her death, we're still trying to understand whether she was a feminist icon or a cautionary tale about what we're willing to overlook in the name of genius. Let's start with something Coco understood better than almost anyone. If you control the narrative, you control everything. She spent her entire life lying about her past, and she was so good at it that even her biographers struggle to separate fact from the mythology she carefully constructed. The truth? Gabrielle Bonheur Chanel was born in 1883 in a charity hospital for the destitute in Saumur, France. Her mother was an unmarried laundrywoman. Her father was a street vendor who abandoned the family when Gabrielle was 12, dropping her and her siblings at an orphanage run by nuns and never looking back. For 6 formative years, she lived in those austere halls, learning to sew, surrounded by the stark black and white that would become her signature palette. The story Coco told? That she was raised by austere but respectable aunts, that her childhood was merely strict rather than desperately poor, that her father was a businessman who traveled. She erased the orphanage, the poverty, the abandonment. She understood that in the world she wanted to conquer, origins mattered, so she invented better ones. Here's what's fascinating. Those lies weren't weaknesses. They were survival strategies. A working-class girl from an orphanage doesn't get invited to salons or funded by wealthy lovers unless she can present herself as something more acceptable. Coco's greatest creation wasn't the Chanel suit or Chanel No. 5. It was Coco Chanel herself, the persona, the myth, the woman who seemed to spring fully formed from nowhere, owing nothing to anyone. Let's talk about something fashion history often glosses over with euphemisms. Coco Chanel was a kept woman before she was a designer. She was what the French politely called a cocotte, a woman supported by wealthy lovers, and she was strategic about it. Her first significant relationship was with Etienne Balsan, a textile heir who kept her in luxury at his chateau. She learned how to move in wealthy circles, how to dress, how to be charming. But Balsan saw her as a mistress, an amusement. Coco wanted more, so she leveraged that relationship into an introduction to Arthur Boy Capel, a British polo player and businessman who was even wealthier and, crucially, believed in her ambitions. Boy Capel funded her first hat shop in 1910. Let's be clear about what this means. Coco didn't pull herself up by her bootstraps. She was financed by a lover who could afford to indulge her. But here's where her genius appears. She took his money and turned it into an empire. She didn't just play the mistress waiting for marriage. She built a business that would outlive him, outlive all of them. When Boy Capel died in a car accident in 1919, Coco was devastated. By all accounts, he was the love of her life, the one man who saw her as an equal. But she didn't collapse into grief and fade away. She channeled that pain into work, creating some of her most revolutionary designs in the years immediately following his death. The little black dress, which debuted in 1926, was allegedly inspired by her mourning clothes for Boy. She turned personal tragedy into a fashion revolution. After Boy, there were other powerful men. The Duke of Westminster, one of the wealthiest men in Britain, proposed to her multiple times. She refused. There have been several Duchesses of Westminster, she reportedly said. There is only one Chanel. She understood that marriage would mean disappearing into someone else's identity, and she'd worked too hard creating her own. Every great story needs a worthy adversary, and Coco's was Elsa Schiaparelli, the Italian designer who represented everything Coco despised: surrealism, bold colors, collaboration with artists like Salvador Dali. Where Coco believed in timeless simplicity, Schiaparelli created shocking pink evening gowns with lobster prints. Where Coco made clothes women could actually live in, Schiaparelli made clothes that were works of art. The rivalry was vicious. Coco refused to even say Schiaparelli's name, referring to her only as that Italian artist who makes clothes. When Schiaparelli became the favorite designer of the Duchess of Windsor, Coco seethed. The two women represented fundamentally different visions of what fashion could be. And for a while in the 1930s, it wasn't clear which vision would win. Spoiler alert, Coco won, but not immediately. During World War II, Coco closed her fashion house and retreated, while Schiaparelli struggled through the war years and never fully recovered. By the time Coco made her comeback in 1954, Schiaparelli was essentially finished. Coco outlasted her rival through sheer stubbornness and longevity. Sometimes winning is just refusing to quit. Here's where we need to address the darkness that Coco's admirers would prefer to ignore. During World War II, while Paris was occupied by Nazi Germany, Coco Chanel began an affair with Hans Günther von Dinklage, a German intelligence officer. She lived with him at the Ritz Paris throughout the occupation, enjoying comfort and luxury while other Parisians starved. It gets worse. Coco attempted to use Nazi connections to regain control of her perfume business from the Wertheimer family, who were Jewish. She tried to exploit anti-Jewish laws to take what wasn't hers. When that failed, she was allegedly involved in a mission called Operation Model Hut, carrying messages between Nazi officers and British contacts. Whether she was a genuine spy or simply a desperate opportunist trying to protect herself remains debated. After the liberation of Paris in 1944, many women who'd collaborated with Germans had their heads shaved in public, were paraded through streets, humiliated. Coco was arrested but released within hours, possibly because of intervention by Winston Churchill, possibly because she had information that could damage powerful people. She fled to Switzerland and lived in exile for nearly a decade. This is the part of Coco's story that complicates everything. How do we reconcile her genius as a designer with her moral compromises during the war? How do we celebrate the woman who liberated fashion while acknowledging she tried to exploit the Holocaust for business advantage? There's no clean answer. We can hold both truths simultaneously, that she changed fashion forever and that she made choices we cannot defend or excuse. In 1954, at age 70, after nearly a decade in exile, Coco announced she was returning to fashion. The French press was brutal. They hadn't forgiven her collaboration. They called her designs outdated, irrelevant, a sad attempt by an old woman to reclaim past glory. Her first show back was reportedly a disaster in Paris, but American buyers saw something different. While Paris sneered, American department stores placed massive orders. American women understood what Coco had always known. They didn't want the ultra-feminine, ultra-structured, new look that Christian Dior had made dominant. They wanted comfort and elegance combined. They wanted clothes they could actually wear to work, to lunch, to life. Within 2 years, Coco was back on top, more influential than ever. She worked until the very end, dying in 1971 at age 87 in her suite at the Ritz Paris. Still designing, still creating, still refusing to retire. Her last words were reportedly, "You see, this is how you die." Always performing, always in control of the narrative, right to the end. Let's talk about the Chanel suit, because it's more than fashion. It's philosophy disguised as tweed. Introduced in 1925 and perfected over decades, the suit was revolutionary precisely because it looked so simple. A collarless cardigan-style jacket, a graceful knee-length skirt, usually in tweed, that most English of fabrics, but cut with French precision. Every detail had purpose. The chain sewn into the jacket hem so it would hang perfectly, the silk lining that matched the blouse, the pockets that actually functioned, because Coco understood women had things to carry, the ease of movement because she believed fashion should enhance life, not restrict it. Jackie Kennedy wore a pink Chanel suit in Dallas on that terrible day in November 1963. The images of that blood-stained suit became some of the most iconic and tragic photographs of the 20th century. That's how deeply Chanel had woven itself into the fabric of power and femininity. The suit could take you from office to lunch, to the most important moments of history. But here's what makes the Chanel suit truly brilliant. It was armor that looked like elegance. It gave women authority without making them look like they were trying too hard, without forcing them to dress like men to be taken seriously. It said, "I am powerful, I am refined, and I didn't sacrifice comfort or femininity to get here." Chanel No. 5 deserves its own story. In 1921, Coco commissioned perfumer Ernest Beau to create something completely new. Not a single flower scent like every other perfume of the era, but something abstract, complex, modern. Beau presented several samples. Coco chose the 5th one, and being superstitious about the number 5, she kept the laboratory number as the name. But the genius was in how she marketed it. She gave bottles to her wealthiest clients, who wore it and created buzz. She placed it on her boutique counter rather than in perfume shops, making it fashion rather than cosmetics. And when asked what she wore to bed, she replied, "Why, Chanel No. 5, of course." When Marilyn Monroe echoed that line decades later, the perfume became immortal. Here's the scandalous part. Coco sold the perfume rights to the Wertheimer family in 1924, keeping only 10% for herself. She spent the rest of her life trying to regain control, including that attempted exploitation during World War II. The Wertheimers eventually gave her a steady income and limited control to keep her quiet. But Chanel No. 5 made them billionaires while Coco watched. The perfume is still one of the best-selling fragrances in the world, a bottle sold every 30 seconds somewhere on Earth. So what do we do with Coco Chanel? How do we understand a woman who liberated fashion while collaborating with fascists? Who believed women deserved comfort and independence but treated her workers terribly? Who created timeless elegance while telling elaborate lies about her origins? Perhaps the answer is that Coco was exactly what she appeared to be, a survivor who used every weapon available to claw her way from an orphanage to the pinnacle of luxury. She was ruthless because the world she wanted to conquer was ruthless. She was amoral about her personal relationships because she'd learned early that sentiment was a luxury the poor couldn't afford. She created beauty, but she wasn't beautiful in her soul. And yet, the things she created genuinely changed women's lives. The little black dress is still a wardrobe staple, a century after she introduced it. The Chanel suit still conveys authority and elegance. Costume jewelry is still fashionable, because Coco proved elegance isn't about how much you spend. Women can move freely in their clothes, because Coco insisted comfort and style weren't enemies. Her feminism was accidental and incomplete, but it was real. She didn't march or organize or theorize about women's liberation. She simply lived as if women deserved the same freedom of movement, the same access to comfort, the same right to define their own elegance that men had always enjoyed. She didn't ask permission, she just did it, and the world changed. Today, Chanel is one of the most valuable luxury brands in the world, worth billions, still privately held by the Wertheimer family, still making that little black dress, still bottling Chanel No. 5, still crafting that perfect suit. Karl Lagerfeld stewarded the brand for 36 years until his death in 2019, understanding that honoring Coco meant continuing to innovate, not embalming her vision in nostalgia. The mirrors in her atelier at 31 Rue Cambon in Paris still line the famous staircase where she'd watch her shows. Hidden from view, always observing, always controlling. You can visit that space now. It's preserved exactly as she left it, filled with her favorite things: books, mirrors, crystal, beige and black, the tools of her mythology. Coco Chanel was not a good person by most moral standards. She was selfish, ruthless, occasionally cruel, and made choices during World War II that cannot be defended. But she was a genius who changed how women dress, how they move through the world, what they believe is possible for themselves. She proved that a girl from nowhere could become an icon, that simplicity could be more luxurious than excess, that women deserved better than what the fashion industry had been offering them. She once said, "Fashion fades, only style remains the same." What she didn't say is that sometimes style is built on compromises we'd rather not examine, funded by lovers we'd prefer to forget, achieved through ruthlessness we're uncomfortable acknowledging. Coco Chanel was all of these contradictions, wrapped in a Breton striped shirt and ropes of pearls. And maybe that's exactly why she still fascinates us. She reminds us that genius is rarely tidy, that revolution is rarely pure, and that the women we celebrate are usually more complicated than the myths we tell about them. If this more complex portrait of Coco Chanel intrigued you, subscribe to History on High Heels for more stories about women who changed the world, flaws and all. Hit that like button if you believe understanding history means looking at the whole picture, not just the pretty parts. Until next time, stay curious, stay critical, and thank you for watching.